inflation is the primary influence on this budget. It will be solid, it will be sensible, it will be suited to the times. We've got some issues to deal with in the near term. Australians are there for each other when times are tough, and the budget on Tuesday night will show that the Albanese government is there for them.
The first budget of a new government. A moment when it puts taxpayers' money where its election mouth was, or, alternatively, its greatest chance to tell us why it is walking away from everything it promised to do.
Mr Keating, thank you very much for coming in. And where's the reordering of society that we've come to expect from a socialist government?
Well, there is a very substantial reordering of priorities in this budget.
If we avoid the hard decisions, they are only going to get harder in the future.
And he swung his axe in all directions.
We're being upfront with the Australian people.
Treasurers have famously walked back from promises in their first budgets on a number of occasions, citing budget black holes or changed economic circumstances.
You know what we're up against. You see it every day at the supermarket, in your pay packet, when the electricity bill arrives. And you didn't send us to this place to bury the bad news or gloss over the glaring issues or wish away the warning signs.
In Jim Chalmers' case, he has been busier than most, both insisting the government would stick with its promises, but also resetting expectations about grim times ahead. And to be fair, the rapid decline in the global economy, the war in Ukraine and the impact of natural disasters on food prices at home have certainly given the Treasurer plenty of justifiable reason to change the budget story. But having made a virtue of unadventurous and limited election promises and painted the coalition as the profligate dispensers of pork barrel largesse, Chalmers' greatest challenge in the lead-up to the budget has not been funding election promises. It is the much more momentous task of setting expectations for what the government can do for voters when there is little good economic news in prospect, and what it can do to address a parlous post-pandemic budget situation.
Why is he having a budget statement at this time? It's not like it has to be done. We have a budget for 22-23. Well, the biggest pressure really is to take control of the narrative, the policy narrative in particular, to say to the Australian people, I'm here, I'm taking responsibility for this, you can hold me accountable for this, and this is my vision for the nation's future. That's the biggest thing.
The government may have decided not to make any decisive change to the Stage 3 tax cuts due in 2024 in this budget, but for the former head of Treasury and chair of the last big review of our tax system, Ken Henry, the crucial budget test will not necessarily be about short-term spending cuts and forecasts, but the government's preparedness to spell out the longer-term problems.
I think it's about time that we in Australia, our politicians levelled with us and said the tax ratio is going to have to increase. Not by 5 percentage points, but it is going to have to increase. And this crazy artificial cap of 23.9% that we've had on the tax to GDP ratio for many years now, that has to be dispensed with.
Bracing for the longer-term cost of budget change is one thing, but taxpayers go into this budget already feeling quite a lot of pain.
Real wages have been falling. So last financial year, they went backwards 3.5%. That's significant. This financial year, they're forecast to go back again another 2.5%. And Australians are going to be waiting another 2 years for a real wage increase. The number of mortgage holders now paying more than 30% of their income in mortgage payments has gone up from 10 to 20%. It's forecast to go up to 25%. We've seen rents, particularly across Sydney and Melbourne, really accelerate.
On top of the financial pain Australians have already been feeling, the prospects for what lie ahead have also been getting worse. Jim Chalmers has taken the unusual step in the past few days of releasing the major economic forecasts before the budget. They show economic growth slowing, unemployment rising and higher inflation not going away. And while we might not be heading for a technical recession, that is, 6 months of the economy contracting, weaker job prospects and continuing inflation means households will be feeling even worse off than they are now.
Their real incomes are going backwards. We're going to see unemployment rising, asset prices dropping. It's going to feel a lot like a recession. Economic times are going to feel a lot less hopeful. There's going to be a lot less opportunity, and there's going to be a lot more people under significant financial pressure.
That means at the next outing by the Treasurer in the May budget, people will be feeling a lot more nervous about the future than they are now. That may make them less or more prepared to consider big changes to how governments operate.
We can see that, in the last 20 or 30 years in this country, how difficult economic reform has been. But I think the time really is now, coming out of the pandemic, when you are facing these economic headwinds, I think people are more open to the types of reforms that may well drive that next wave of economic growth.
The foundation for that opportunity has to be laid tomorrow night by the Treasurer being open with the Australian public, bringing them into his confidence, telling them that he does understand the situation that they're confronting, and then saying to them, and for a while this is going to be tough, and not misleading them about next year's budget.
The political trade-off and the political debate is about broken promises, economic records and changed circumstances. The federal opposition has put down a number of markers today about what it thinks the tests for the government will be tomorrow night. Not necessarily tests the coalition itself met in government.
You're sitting around the cabinet table making hard decisions. That's the nature of it. But you can never abscond from trying to deal with those issues that you have. And right now, the challenge is to deal with inflationary and interest rate pressures.
The coalition says that Labor has to build upon the strong position inherited from the coalition, put downward pressure on inflation and interest rates without increasing taxes, increase productivity and participation, and avoid breaking promises. Economists clearly have a different set of tests. The toughest audience, however, will be voters.